Abril Perez-Sagayan. Abril Perez-Sagayan was born in 1971 in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Her mother, Maria del Socorro, worked tirelessly 7 days a week to provide her 3 children, Abril, Javier, and Ana, with quality education and the opportunity for a better life. From a young age, Abril demonstrated exceptional intelligence and a deep interest in science, setting her sights on higher education and financial independence. As she grew older, she became known for her sharp intellect, compassion, and striking beauty. Her sociable personality and natural leadership made her both admired by friends and respected in her professional circles. Abril earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Nuevo León and later completed a master's degree in business at the Monterrey Institute of Technology. As her career advanced, she found her passion in digital sales, where she quickly rose through the ranks to become an executive director at Bilbao Bank in the United States. During the early 1990s, while Abril's professional life was thriving, she met Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, an ambitious entrepreneur born on November 11, 1968. The two shared much in common. Both had attended the Monterrey Institute of Technology, where Abril studied and Juan Carlos graduated with distinction. Juan Carlos also completed studies at prestigious U.S. universities, including the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. Armed with an elite education and strong business acumen, he built a career in e-commerce and financial technology. Their friendship soon evolved into romance. After several years of dating, Abril and Juan Carlos married in 1994. Together, they collaborated on a series of innovative ventures, including online stores such as PAG Mobile and Plascom. They also contributed to the creation of the Deremate store, which would later become one of Mexico's leading e-commerce platforms. By 1999, their life appeared nothing short of idyllic. Both were professionally successful, financially stable, and deeply admired as a power couple. Their happiness grew with the birth of their first child, Ana Cecilia, in 2001. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., followed by their youngest, Julio Andres, in 2005. Despite her demanding work schedule, Abril always made time for her children, attending their school events and caring for them personally. Her dedication earned her deep respect from friends, colleagues, and family alike. Juan Carlos was also seen as a devoted father, and together they appeared to embody the image of a perfect family. Yet beneath the polished exterior, cracks were beginning to show. Behind closed doors, the family lived under the strain of Juan Carlos's volatile temper. He was a controlling and aggressive man whose anger frequently erupted at home. What began as verbal abuse toward Abril, cruel words and demeaning remarks, slowly escalated into something far darker. As time went on, the situation deteriorated, and Juan began using physical violence against Abril, frequently beating her. Abril tried to hide the abuse from her friends and family, fearing she wouldn't be able to support their children alone. She believed remaining with Juan would ensure a better future for their children. However, by 2009, the situation had grown so severe that others began to suspect what was happening within the family. Abril had always kept it a secret from her friends and relatives, but whenever they asked about a possible divorce, she insisted she would not leave Juan. By 2014, Juan had reached the height of his career, becoming a leading figure in Amazon's retail division in Mexico. A year later, when Juan was appointed as the director of Amazon in Mexico, the family relocated to Mexico City. Abril hoped the new environment would help solve their problems, but unfortunately, the abuse persisted. Juan portrayed himself publicly as a loving husband and father, but in private, he was abusive and controlling toward his wife, Abril. He often shared posts on social media expressing his love for her, yet in reality, he constantly accused her of infidelity and even hired a private investigator to collect evidence. Despite his flourishing career, which included becoming the director of e-commerce at a multinational company, his marriage was falling apart. The tension between Juan and Abril became intolerable, and after a trip to Monterrey to celebrate Christmas with her family, she realized she could no longer remain in the marriage. During that trip, Juan's rage exploded, and he physically assaulted Abril, seizing her by the neck and strangling her. He had received a photo from the private investigator showing Abril with a male co-worker, whom he mistakenly assumed was her lover. In truth, the man was simply a colleague. Abril chose not to argue with Juan's accusations and instead filed for divorce on January 4, 2019. They had already separated and were preparing to tell their children about the upcoming divorce. However, the situation turned violent one early morning. Abril was asleep when she was suddenly hit on the head with a baseball bat by her partner, Juan. Initially dazed, Abril thought the ceiling had collapsed, but as her sight cleared, she saw Juan standing over her. She tried to push him away and escape, but he overpowered her, forcing her to scream for help. Their 16-year-old son ran to defend his mother, quickly assessing what was happening and intervening to stop Juan from inflicting more harm. He succeeded in pulling Abril away from Juan and helped her leave the house to get emergency medical treatment for her injuries. After the incident, Juan turned to social media to present his version of events. He made multiple posts alleging that Abril had been unfaithful, stolen his money, and wasted 26 years of his life. He also claimed that Abril had physically assaulted him by stabbing him in the chest with a knife. To support his accusations, he attached photos of the knife and what appeared to be bloodstains. One of Juan's friends responded by recording a video urging people to share the information. However, Juan's posts grew increasingly erratic. At one point, he even shared a message claiming that Abril had taken her own life, despite the fact that she was clearly alive. This action remains baffling to this day. Meanwhile, Abril was recovering in the hospital. After being discharged, she promptly filed a police report against her husband. The authorities sided with her, granting her custody of their 2 children and ordering Juan to pay 6,000 Mexican pesos, roughly equivalent to $1,350, in monthly alimony. However, this sum was considered inadequate to cover the expenses of raising 2 minors. After conquering her initial fears and financial hardships, Abril began a new chapter in her life, motivated by her determination to build a better future for her children. She moved to Monterrey with her kids, where she attended Juan's trial and filed for divorce. Reflecting on her traumatic ordeal and the years of abuse, Abril reassessed her life. She joined a Christian organization that supported families and began working as a divorce counselor. Her ultimate objective was to create a support network for women who had endured similar abuse, just as she had. As Abril focused on rebuilding her life, the legal proceedings against Juan Carlos progressed. 9 months after the assault, Juan was formally charged with attempted murder. The case proceeded to court, where Judge Federico Mask ordered Juan's informal detention. Consequently, Juan was imprisoned for several weeks. He later appealed the ruling, and on November 3, 2019, Judge Hector Jimenez reviewed the case. He deemed the hospital photos and Abril's testimony, along with that of her son, insufficient to establish Juan's guilt. The judge also concluded that if Juan had truly intended to kill Abril, he would have succeeded. Furthermore, he classified the baseball bat used in the assault as a blunt object rather than a deadly weapon. As a result, the charges were reduced, and the initial detention order was revoked. With only a few hearings remaining, the outcome of the case became uncertain, causing Abril and her loved ones deep distress and frustration. In a desperate plea for her safety, Abril wrote to the judge, voicing her fears for her life and urging him to recognize the danger Juan posed. Unfortunately, her letter was disregarded. Juan then initiated a custody battle for their children. Abril was forced to leave Monterrey and travel to Mexico City for the remaining hearings. She was also required to subject her children to psychological evaluations, as Juan claimed in his lawsuit that Abril had manipulated them into rejecting him. A week before an important court hearing, Abril sat down with her 3 children to express her love and share her hopes for their future. She encouraged them to pursue their dreams and to find the strength to forgive their father. The conversation felt like a farewell, as if Abril sensed it might be her last chance to reassure her children of her affection. On November 25, 2019, Abril followed her ex-husband's instructions to prevent possible legal complications that could have resulted in her losing custody of her children. She traveled to Mexico City, coincidentally on the same day that thousands of women marched through the streets to mark the International Day Against Gender-Based Violence on March 19, 2021. The court later reclassified the case involving violence against Abril, which had taken place in January 2019, as attempted murder. This decision was reached after Abril's relatives and the prosecutor filed several petitions for judicial review, ultimately leading to the annulment of the original ruling. 2 months later, on May 23rd, the remaining suspects in Abril's murder case were captured, including 3 women and 1 man. The investigation resulted in the issuance of 3 search warrants and 8 arrest warrants. During the first search, 48-year-old Amanda Vicente Rodriguez was arrested. A sequence of arrests followed in connection with the recent crime. In the Jardín de Morelos neighborhood, 34-year-old Mabel Montelier Morena and 48-year-old Garcia Alicia Flores Valdez were taken into custody, and their cell phones were confiscated. Another arrest occurred in the Alvar Aragon area of Mexico City, where 50-year-old Isa Jalil Castillo, also known as Aguirre or Alvar's godmother, was detained. At the same time, 9 gang members were apprehended, 7 of whom were allegedly linked to Abril's case. However, one suspect, Juan Carlos, remained at large, leading authorities to reissue a warrant for his arrest. Attorney General Ernesto Godoy explained that the initial warrant had been for attempted murder, while the new one was for the actual killing of a woman. Despite persistent efforts to locate Juan, he continued to evade capture. In an unexpected twist, a man named Rolf, also known as El Shalom, reached out to the authorities claiming to possess information about the case. During questioning, he confessed that he was the one who had actually pulled the trigger and taken Abril's life. The perpetrator, identified as Rodolfo Daniel Bendis, eventually pleaded guilty to the crime. He stated that Juan Carlos had promised to pay him $10,000 to carry out the act. According to Bendis, Juan Carlos had contacted him while in pretrial detention, providing him with Abril's address in Mexico City. Juan Carlos allegedly instructed Bendis to monitor Abril and supplied written directions detailing how to commit the murder. He also promised to deliver a firearm to Bendis in Monterrey. However, when Bendis arrived in Monterrey, no one contacted him, and he never received the firearm. He returned to Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until after his release from prison. Once released, Juan Carlos reached out to Bendis again and informed him that the plan had changed. He now wanted Abril to be killed in Mexico City, as he had managed to lure her there. The case was divided into several hearings due to the complexity of the judicial process. The first trial commenced in August 2022, with Bendis and Juan Carlos serving as the initial defendants. During this proceeding, the prosecution presented 28 witness testimonies and 14 pieces of expert evidence. During the recent trial, a key defendant named L. Sean Gallon testified regarding his participation in planning and committing the crime of femicide, for which he had previously pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court announced its verdict, finding Rodolfo Daniel Bendis and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty and sentencing them to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay approximately 56,000 Mexican pesos, or $30,000 in damages. Following the trial, the 2 men were transferred to a detention facility to begin serving their sentences. However, Abril's family immediately declared their intention to appeal the decision, believing that the punishment was far too lenient. They emphasized that Rodolfo had been the one who fired the fatal shots. Regarding the remaining defendants, it had previously been decided in October 2014 that their trials would be conducted separately. This ruling was challenged by prosecutors, who argued that it would cause significant delays in the proceedings and create unnecessary additional expenses for the court. The tragic case of Abril continues to impact her family and the broader Mexican society, and despite the recent verdict, the legal process remains ongoing. After one of the court hearings, Abril got into a car with her children and their attorney. She asked the lawyer to drive them to the airport for their return flight to Monterrey. Along the way, they stopped at an intersection where a motorcyclist pulled up beside the vehicle. The motorcyclist, who was actually a hired assassin, shot Abril multiple times in the head. Fortunately, her children, who were seated in the back seat, escaped serious injury. One of them, who was lying down, was grazed by a bullet but sustained only a minor wound. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. Despite their best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries 6 hours later. The lawyer immediately contacted Abril's family to inform them of the tragedy. Her brother Javier traveled to Mexico City to manage the aftermath of the incident. The community strongly suspected Juan Carlos's involvement in the crime, but the authorities took a different position. Since the shooter's identity and motives were unknown, they were unable to classify the case as femicide or make an arrest. Instead, the case was initially treated as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather evidence that could potentially prove it was a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to accuse Juan Carlos, but her account was deleted as a result. Abril's family was fearful that the perpetrator would go unpunished and sought to raise public awareness about the case through social media. The fact that Abril died on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence added a deeper significance to her death. The family organized protests and marches to demand justice for Abril. Following Abril's tragic death, social media erupted in outrage as people realized that she had repeatedly expressed her fear of her abuser, only to be ignored by the authorities. Her family and friends held a funeral mass at the Benito Flores Chapel in Monterrey, where dozens gathered to pay their respects and demand justice for Abril. The funeral procession then proceeded to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles, where Abril was laid to rest. Her case has sparked widespread attention to the issue of gender-based violence, particularly in cases where judges release men who have attacked women. Abril's ex-husband, Juan Carlos, was released from prison after appealing his sentence and was able to track Abril down to Mexico City, where he ultimately took her life. In response to Abril's case, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office has launched an investigation into the judges who allowed Juan Carlos to be released from prison. The judges involved in the case, Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez, are currently under investigation for their roles in the release of Juan Carlos. Additionally, representatives from the political party of former Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador have called for Judge Mosa's dismissal from office, citing his involvement in a prior controversial case where he released a doctor accused of disrespecting a patient in a public hospital. The judge had initially refused to charge Juan Carlos with femicide, choosing instead to charge him only with sexual violence, which subsequently led to Juan's release from custody. Amid the widespread public outrage surrounding Abril's case, Rafael Guerra, president of the Supreme Court of Mexico City, suspended all judges connected to the matter on November 29. Claudia Sheinbaum, the head of government for Mexico City, declared that the government would launch an investigation into Abril's death. She also warned that the judges could be held accountable for her death if it was proven that Juan Carlos was indeed responsible. Both local and international media reported that Juan Carlos had been released despite clear evidence against him. In response, Abril's family founded a non-profit organization called The Voice of Abril, dedicated to supporting victims of violence by offering resources, psychological counseling, and legal assistance. The mass protests following Abril's death compelled the prosecutor's office to reclassify the charges against Juan Carlos, seeking to prosecute him for attempted murder, a charge that could lead to imprisonment. After being charged, Juan Carlos took to social media, claiming he wanted justice for Abril's murder and that the true culprit should be punished. He also insisted he was ready to cooperate with law enforcement, asserting that despite their troubled marriage, he would never have wanted her to suffer such a tragic fate. However, his statement provoked widespread anger among the public. His 18-year-old daughter, Ana Cecilia, publicly denounced her father, accusing him of physically and psychologically abusing her, her siblings, and Abril for years. She shared disturbing images of Abril's injuries sustained after the baseball bat attack. Ana described her father as a narcissistic sociopath who had allegedly bribed his way out of prison. During the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos, though not directly in connection with Abril's case, but rather for violating judicial orders. He had been released under the condition that he report to the police station weekly, a requirement he failed to meet. After missing 2 court hearings, Judge Agustin Monrad Gaspar Canel was left with no choice but to issue the arrest order. Juan later wrote a letter claiming he feared for his life and avoided attending the hearings, stating that he and his family had received death threats since Abril's death. He believed that someone might seek revenge if he appeared in court. However, the judge dismissed this reasoning and issued an arrest warrant, also prohibiting Juan from leaving the country. The investigation continued, aiming to uncover the full truth. A letter written by Juan was later found, in which he again denied any involvement in Abril's death, claiming he had never intended to harm her. He described the night of the incident, asserting that Abril had started an argument, stabbed him in the side, and that he struck her with a bat in self-defense. The letter provoked outrage among those who read it, as no one believed Juan's version of events. The investigation revealed that Juan Carlos remained the prime suspect in the case. Further inquiries by the police identified at least 7 additional individuals implicated in the crime against Abril. This conclusion was drawn after examining surveillance footage from the area where the attack took place. The footage captured 2 cars following Abril as she left the courthouse. The drivers of these vehicles were in communication with the shooter who ultimately killed her. After the assault, the gunman and the cars fled the scene. Although the identities of the followers were initially unknown, the investigation indicated that Juan Carlos might have been directly involved in orchestrating the attack. According to investigators, Juan Carlos likely met these individuals while he was in prison and paid one of them for protection. After his associates were released, Juan Carlos was also freed and later paid them to murder Abril. Significantly, Juan Carlos was the only person who knew Abril's route to Mexico City, as he had personally requested to meet her. After the disturbing details of the case were made public, no law firm agreed to defend the suspect, Juan Carlos. Meanwhile, Abril's friends and relatives fully cooperated with law enforcement, providing every piece of information that could assist in his capture. However, sources from the General Prosecutor's Office soon revealed that Juan Carlos had managed to escape Mexico by crossing the border into the United States. Mexican authorities quickly notified Interpol, which launched an international manhunt for him. As a result, Juan Carlos became a wanted fugitive in over 151 countries, with global authorities determined to bring him to justice. By the end of January 2024, the investigation had gone cold, with no new developments or leads. 4 years have now passed since Abril's tragic death, yet the true perpetrators remain unpunished. Her children currently live with her family on the outskirts of Mexico City, clinging to the hope that justice will one day prevail. The question on everyone's mind remains the same: where is Juan Carlos? His capture continues to be the top priority for investigators. Abril's family has vowed to persist in their pursuit of justice until Juan Carlos is located and held accountable for his crimes. Moving on to the next case. Ashley Wadsworth. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002, in Vernon Township, British Columbia, Canada. She was the daughter of Kenneth Wadsworth and Christy Jenden and had an older sister named Haley. The Wadsworth family was large and tightly connected, consisting of more than 50 relatives, including cousins, uncles, and aunts of various degrees of relation, all residing in the same area. Ashley was a lively, sociable, and energetic girl who was well-liked and had many friends. She loved outdoor activities such as swimming, horseback riding, and skiing. She was also fond of tennis and played the clarinet. Ashley maintained an active presence on social media, often posting memes, jokes, and photos. It was through social media that Ashley met Jack Seppel in 2015 when she was 12 years old and he was 15. Jack Seppel was born on January 9, 1999. His mother, Tracy Dalton, was married to a man named Ricky. Jack's relationship with his father, who died in 2019, was reportedly strained. Jack did not stay in contact with his brother, Jordan, but he remained in touch with his sister, Nadia. Other than his mother and sister, Jack did not maintain many close relationships, preferring to interact mainly through the internet and video games. According to Jack's acquaintances, he had a mixed reputation in school. On one hand, he was remembered as a pleasant, entertaining, and spirited child. On the other hand, they recalled his darker side, which surfaced when he became angry and showed violent behavior toward himself and others. A mutual friend introduced Jack to Ashley through social media, a common way for teenagers to connect and form online friendships. As their virtual friendship developed, Ashley and Jack became close online companions. At that time, Ashley didn't own a smartphone and accessed social media using her family's computer, so her family was aware of her connection with Jack. During their long-distance friendship, Jack was involved with other girls, and Ashley also experienced normal teenage relationships. Although they sometimes stopped talking, their bond never entirely disappeared, and they continued to stay in contact throughout the years. As they got older, Ashley and Jack's relationship deepened. They began communicating through video calls, which fostered a more personal and romantic bond. Jack became a recognizable presence to Ashley's family, who often greeted him kindly whenever they saw her speaking with him. He also sent Ashley gifts, such as teddy bears and handbags, on several occasions. Ashley's family and friends noticed that she frequently compared every boy she met to Jack. However, because of the considerable time difference between their locations, Jack living in Essex while Ashley was in Vernon, they found it difficult to coordinate their conversations, often waking up too early or staying up too late to speak. When Ashley turned 15 in 2018, she began expressing a wish to meet Jack in person. However, her family refused to allow her to travel alone to another continent. Like many young couples, they occasionally argued, and whenever Ashley blocked Jack on social media after their disputes, he would find alternate ways to reach her, creating new accounts or sending messages through his sister or mutual acquaintances. This conduct was regarded by Ashley's loved ones as unsettling and invasive, yet she continued to insist that Jack was a kind and caring individual. In October 2018, Jack, who was 19 at the time, had Ashley's name tattooed on his arm when she was only 16. Her parents viewed this gesture as excessive and cautioned her to be careful. However, Jack soon began to display jealous and aggressive tendencies. He would become enraged if he suspected Ashley was speaking with other boys, even though he continued dating other girls himself. He told Ashley she was his favorite and vowed loyalty only to her. This incident marked the start of a troubling behavioral pattern. Ashley's friends and family became increasingly alarmed as Jack's behavior worsened. One day, Ashley phoned a friend while she was at Jack's house, and he refused to let her leave. According to the friend who overheard the conversation, Ashley appeared surprisingly composed, as though she had become accustomed to such situations. She merely told Jack to stop acting crazy. Ashley confided in her friends about what had happened, but did not inform her parents. Nevertheless, her friends strongly urged her to end all contact with Jack. Despite his history of violent outbursts and concerning behavior, Ashley and Jack repeatedly reconciled. At only 18 years old, Ashley had known Jack since her early teens, yet she seemed unaware of the extent to which he had controlled and manipulated her from a young age. Ashley began working at fast food restaurants and department stores to save money for recreational purposes. Her first purchase was a tablet, which enabled her to use social media more privately. She then began setting aside money for travel. During her final year of high school, Ashley, a spiritual and curious person, experienced a moment of deep reflection after reading the Book of Mormon. This inspired her to begin following the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ashley graduated from Sighton High School in 2020. Wanting to fully experience college life, she chose to take a one-year break before pursuing higher education. In early 2021, Ashley continued working and saving money. In April of that year, she was baptized into Mormonism. With her growing independence and financial security, Ashley decided to travel to the United Kingdom to meet Jack face-to-face and celebrate his birthday with him. Despite the concerns of her parents and friends, Ashley was resolute about making the trip, as she was legally an adult and had saved enough money herself. On November 12, 2021, Ashley departed from Canada for the UK on a 6-month tourist visa. It was her first time leaving her country, and she was ecstatic. The following day, November 13, 2021, Ashley finally met Jack in person for the first time. On the same day, Ashley changed her profile picture to a photo of the two of them together. At 22 years old, Jack appeared much older than Ashley, who was 19. His numerous tattoos, including several on his face, created a striking contrast with Ashley's youthful and fresh appearance. During her stay in London, Ashley lived with Jack in his house located in a public housing estate in northwest Chelmsford. The neighborhood had a questionable reputation, but they spent time visiting the nicer parts of the city in Essex. Jack seemed to be the same charming and affectionate person Ashley had known online, often complimenting her and taking romantic selfies with her. However, Jack's behavior was erratic, and at times he could be harsh. Even though they were together every day, Ashley's tourist visa prohibited her from working, and Jack was unemployed, living off government benefits. Occasionally, his mother Tracy, who lived nearby, would assist them financially. Throughout her visit, Ashley frequently shared photos and updates on social media, displaying their cheerful moments and romantic outings. The pictures often showed them embracing, reflecting what appeared to be a happy relationship. Ashley stayed in consistent contact with her family through video calls, and initially, everything seemed fine. They even adopted a kitten named Winston, which brought a sense of joy and comfort to their lives. Nevertheless, as time passed, Jack started becoming increasingly distant and isolated. What was meant to be an exciting adventure for Ashley in England soon turned into a confined and lonely experience. Her boyfriend Jack lost interest in exploring the country and instead preferred to stay indoors, smoke, and play video games. Consequently, Ashley's opportunities for activities became very limited, forcing her to do only what Jack desired. Before her arrival in England, one of Ashley's church friends had arranged for her to meet several American missionaries who were visiting Chelmsford at the same time. Ashley had looked forward to meeting them, but Jack forbade her from attending church on Sundays. Despite his restrictions, Ashley continued secretly communicating with the missionaries via text messages, deleting the conversations afterward to prevent Jack from finding out. Her new friends quickly recognized that Jack was controlling and potentially abusive. When Ashley confided in them about her struggles, she admitted that she was aware she deserved better, but was attempting to keep Jack content. However, the abuse extended beyond emotional control. Around 6 weeks into her trip, Jack turned violent after discovering that Ashley had blocked 2 UK phone numbers. He wrongly assumed that the numbers belonged to other men, sparking a jealous and furious reaction. In a disturbing text message sent to his mother, Jack admitted that he had physically assaulted Ashley. Ashley created a hidden social media profile where she documented the bruises she had sustained. She confided in her sister, Haley, about the abuse but warned her not to inform their mother, fearing that their family might turn against Jack. After Jack overdosed on anti-anxiety medication in late December 2021, Ashley was assigned the role of managing his medication as his caregiver. She kept this responsibility secret from her mother and friends, but Haley unintentionally disclosed it. Concerned, Ashley's mother urged her to come home, but Ashley insisted on staying with Jack until he recovered. In early January 2022, another alarming event took place. Jack shattered a beer glass over Ashley's head, causing her to cry uncontrollably. While forcing her to clean up the broken shards, Ashley contacted her sister through a video call, exposing the full extent of her circumstances. Jack was frantic, pacing restlessly, shouting, and grinding his teeth. His agitation prompted Ashley to reach out to Haley, who pleaded with her to return home. However, her pleas went unheeded. A short period of calm followed, during which Jack celebrated his 23rd birthday with his family, where everyone acted as though everything was normal. Attempting to ease the growing tension, Jack's mother and stepfather arranged a family vacation to a seaside town shortly afterward. The photos from the trip appeared cheerful, showing a smiling and serene Ashley, which comforted her parents, who still had no idea how serious the situation had become. By late January, a heated argument erupted, and Jack once again turned violent. He struck Ashley and hurled a candle and a TV remote at her while she was video chatting with Haley, who begged her to come back home. Although Ashley initially agreed, she ultimately chose to remain. Despite seeing Jack's cruelty firsthand, Ashley continued to hope that the kind, affectionate person she had once known was still within him. She believed that with enough time, love, or perhaps medical help, Jack could overcome his violent impulses, a belief that her mother also echoed in later conversations with Jack. Jack accused Ashley of being unfaithful, physically assaulted her, and then apologized afterward. Though he expressed guilt over his actions, his abusive behavior persisted. The situation escalated on the morning of February 1st, 2022, when Jack became angry with Ashley once more. He accused her of abandoning him and secretly meeting other people. He demanded to check her phone and access her social media accounts to verify his suspicions. Around 8 a.m., their neighbor Haley Bortonshaw heard Ashley's screams through the shared wall. Ashley soon showed up at Jack's doorstep, drawing attention to the distressing situation unfolding between them. Haley was shocked and Ashley appeared at her door, barefoot and crying, with a cut on her palm that was bleeding. Ashley explained that Jack had become enraged when he caught her looking at intimate photos of them. He had verbally abused her, physically attacked her, smashed her phone, and thrown her kitten against the wall. Despite Haley's concerns for Ashley's safety and fear that Jack might try to harm her, Ashley asked Haley not to call the police. Haley reluctantly agreed, but begged Ashley to see a doctor instead of returning to Jack's apartment. When Ashley refused, Haley decided to go and talk to Jack herself. During their conversation, Jack apologized for his actions and remained calm. Haley then left for a doctor's appointment around 9 a.m. Meanwhile, Jack's neighbor received a misdelivered package and brought it to his doorstep. Jack was hesitant to answer the door, which wasn't unusual since he was known to be an unfriendly and paranoid person. Around this time, Ashley called her family using Jack's cell phone, informing them of her situation. Ashley's mother was already aware of what was going on because Haley had previously confided in her about Jack's abusive behavior towards Ashley. Ashley's parents immediately bought her a return ticket for February 3rd to escape the abusive relationship. When she informed Jack, he offered to drive her to the airport. However, before she left, Ashley's mother made it clear that if Jack hurt her again, she would contact the police. She also advised Ashley to go straight to the airport if Jack assaulted her again. The conversation between Ashley and her family lasted for 3 hours before they ended the call. It was 11 a.m. in Chelmsford and 3 a.m. in Vernon when the call ended. A short time later, Jack sent a message to his mother, admitting to brutally beating Ashley again. During the assault, Ashley fell to the floor and possibly broke her arm. This violent incident occurred between 11:22 a.m. and 12:38 a.m. Ashley managed to send several messages to her family and friends using Jack's phone, but since it was nighttime, no one responded immediately. She also reached out to her friends at the church in Chelmsford, asking for help in describing the emergency. Unfortunately, these messages were not received until hours later, when it was too late to intervene. Between 12:38 and 12:45, Jack violently attacked Ashley, choking her until she lost consciousness. He then proceeded to the kitchen, retrieved an 11-centimeter knife, and repeatedly stabbed Ashley's chest and stomach around 100 times, ultimately ending her life. Following the attack, Jack updated his social media profile picture with a photo of himself and Ashley, accompanied by the caption, "Always mine." He also recorded a video message for Haley, expressing his love for Ashley, apologizing, and stating that he couldn't let her go, adding that his mental state was unstable. The video, which was never sent, showed Ashley's body next to him. Meanwhile, in Vernon, Ashley's family discovered a large number of messages from her on their phones. They immediately contacted Jamie Ashworth, a family friend from their Mormon community in Chelmsford. Jamie and Tyler Borden, another acquaintance from the church, went to Jack's apartment in England. After knocking on the door and receiving no response, they called the police and left the scene. In a desperate effort to conceal his actions, Jack sent text messages to Ashley's family and friends while pretending to be her. However, as concerned messages from loved ones continued to arrive, Jack ignored them completely. Meanwhile, Ashley's family and friends were growing frantic as they repeatedly tried to contact her. Eventually, Jack called his sister, Nadia, and confessed to killing Ashley, even going so far as to show her the body. This horrifying conversation occurred at approximately 4:13 p.m. When the police arrived at the apartment 10 minutes after Nadia's call, the tragedy had already unfolded. They arrested Jack on the spot, finding him covered in blood. He told officers that he had experienced a psychotic episode and admitted to committing the murder. Consequently, he was taken into custody and transferred to Chelmsford Prison. His trial was set for September 7, 2022, at Chelmsford Crown Court. A psychiatric evaluation conducted by the court determined that Jack was mentally competent to stand trial. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming, including a video recording of him confessing to the killing. Confronted with this irrefutable proof, Jack immediately entered a guilty plea. The judge then informed him that, in light of his confession, a life imprisonment sentence was unavoidable. The hearing, presided over by Judge Edward Murray at Chelmsford Crown Court, included detailed testimony from prosecutor Simon Spence, who outlined Jack's lengthy criminal background, dating back to his teenage years. It was during this hearing that Ashley's parents learned the horrifying truth about Jack's past. Jack had a long record of encounters with law enforcement, including arrests for stalking, kidnapping, and violent assault. He had also been the subject of multiple restraining orders, including ones filed by his mother and a former girlfriend. The revelation of Jack's extensive criminal past left Ashley's parents shocked and heartbroken, as they had never imagined the true nature of the man responsible for their daughter's death. During the proceedings, both the prosecution and the defense referred to a letter Jack had written from prison, in which he expressed remorse for his actions. The letter was later made public by Judge Murray, who emphasized the importance of transparency within the justice system. In it, Jack expressed sorrow to Ashley's family, particularly to her mother and sister, Haley, acknowledging that nothing could ever undo the suffering he had caused. He took full responsibility for his actions and admitted that his deteriorating mental health had played a role in the tragedy. Jack also claimed that he had previously discussed his mental health struggles with Ashley. Ultimately, Jack was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after serving 23 years. Moving on to the next case. Banaz Mahmood. Banaz Mahmood was born in Iraq in 1985. She was raised in a conservative household that upheld strong religious principles. When she was 10 years old, her family relocated to the United Kingdom, but their traditional beliefs remained intact. At the age of 17, Banaz was forced into marriage with a man 10 years older than her, who was both illiterate and unable to speak English. The marriage was characterized by severe physical and emotional abuse, which Banaz endured for 2 years before finally finding the courage to leave. Despite her family's strong opposition, Banaz began a new chapter in her life and met a man named Rahmat Sulaimani, with whom she fell deeply in love. However, their relationship had to remain secret because of the cultural prohibitions against romantic involvement outside of marriage. Tragically, Banaz's family was unwilling to allow her to move on with her life. On January 26, 2006, Rahmat reported Banaz missing to the police, but they dismissed his concerns, assuming that she was merely staying with friends. However, Rahmat continued to insist that something was wrong, forcing the authorities to begin an investigation. Banaz's family harbored a sinister motive for their actions, one that would ultimately have devastating consequences. Despite this, Banaz had found love and happiness with her boyfriend Rahmat. They shared dreams of getting married, having children, and creating a joyful family together. These dreams were Banaz's source of strength and hope, helping her endure her family's hostility and cruelty toward her. Her family had never accepted her marriage, and in early October 2005, Banaz realized that she was being followed by individuals sent by her father. On October 10, 2005, Banaz went to the police and recounted the details of her life with her husband, the injuries she had sustained, and the surveillance she was experiencing. She voiced her fears for her safety and even her life, but the police failed to treat her statement with seriousness. For nearly 2 months, Banaz and Rahmat continued to meet in secret, but in early December 2005, they were seen by members of her community. This incident led to a council of male relatives convening at her family's home, where it was decided that Banaz must be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this discussion and reported it to the police, but once again, her warnings were disregarded. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father deceived her into visiting a relative's home, where she was assaulted. She managed to escape and went to the police, who transported her to the hospital. After being discharged, Banaz went to live with Rahmat. However, by mid-January 2006, her family began urging her to return home to reconcile and discuss her relationship with Rahmat. Despite her deep fears, Banaz agreed to go back to her father's house, believing that her mother would protect her. Before returning home, Banaz visited the police station to express her concerns and name the individuals she believed might harm her. Nevertheless, on January 22, 2006, Banaz disappeared, and her boyfriend Rahmat was unable to reach her. Rahmat then filed a missing persons report with the police. The authorities eventually became actively involved in the case, and Chief Inspector Caroline Good was assigned to lead the investigation. She coordinated an extensive search of properties linked to the Mahmood family, suspecting that Banaz might be held captive. The police questioned Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband, along with 3 of her cousins, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Hamid, who were also prime suspects. Despite the police's persistent efforts, Banaz's family members remained uncooperative and refused to assist with the investigation. When officers searched the Mahmood home, they found no photographs of Banaz, and the family provided contradictory and deceptive statements about her whereabouts. The police went on to arrest 30 individuals, including Banaz's relatives and cousins, but all of them attempted to delay the investigation by providing false and misleading information. The investigators obtained authorization to install surveillance devices in the cells of several arrested men, including Banaz's father, uncle, and Muhammad Hamid. The recorded conversations revealed that the 3 men expressed no remorse for their crimes. Instead, they spoke with pride about what they had done to Banaz. The recordings disclosed that on the morning of January 23rd, the Mahmood family intentionally left their house to allow Ali Hussein and Hamid to enter and assault Banaz. The attack persisted for 2 hours, during which Banaz was brutally beaten and tortured. Ultimately, Hamid strangled her to death using a cord. The recordings also confirmed that Banaz's cousin, Muhammad Hamid, had participated in the killing and had threatened Rahmat, a detail that became a crucial turning point in the investigation. The police were appalled as they listened to the recorded evidence, which described Banaz's savage murder and the perpetrators' shameless boasting about their actions. Further investigation revealed that Banaz's body had been forced into a suitcase and transported out of London to an abandoned house with a garden in Birmingham. Detective Caroline Good compared this information with the movement data from the suspect's phones and successfully narrowed down the potential search area. Although the search area was vast and the work was expected to take a long time, the killers inadvertently aided the investigation by talking excessively and bragging about their crimes. During one of their recorded conversations, one of the men mentioned putting a freezer back in its place, providing Caroline with a significant clue to pursue. A police helicopter was dispatched to survey the area, and while circling overhead, it identified a property with a pile of debris in the backyard, which included a white, rectangular object resembling a freezer. When officers arrived at the scene, they began excavating in shifts. As the digging continued and reached about shoulder depth, the team was close to abandoning the effort. However, Caroline Good remembered Muhammad Hamid's words, in which he had boasted about burying Banaz so deeply that she would only be found if someone revealed her location. Persuading her team to continue the search for one more day, Caroline's determination paid off late in the evening of April 28, 2006, when the suitcase containing Banaz's body was finally discovered. Banaz's remains were in severely deteriorated condition, and only dental records and DNA samples could confirm her identity. Her body had been folded into a fetal position, concealed inside a suitcase, and buried beneath a freezer in the garden of a house in Birmingham. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were charged, yet they displayed no remorse and believed they had acted righteously. After the discovery of Banaz's remains, the police were inundated with people offering alibis for the suspects, insisting they were seen in public on the day of the alleged murder. In total, 50 individuals were implicated in Banaz's death, leaving Caroline Good filled with anger, disgust, and contempt toward the men involved in the crime. The case eventually proceeded to trial in March 2007, during which the prosecutor described the killing as a cold-blooded and merciless execution orchestrated by Banaz's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury found all three guilty and sentenced them to life imprisonment with minimum terms ranging between 17 and 23 years. The judge denounced the act as barbaric and unfeeling, declaring that the father had valued his social standing above the life of his own child. Muhammad Ali was apprehended in Iraq in April 2006 for his role in the murder of Banaz Mahmoud. The London police worked to have him extradited to the United Kingdom, and in June 2009, Ali was extradited and subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. The final perpetrator, Omar Hussein, had been hiding in rural Iraq. In December 2009, he quarreled with his brother and was shot in the leg. He was taken to a hospital where the authorities arrested him. At first, Hussein denied being in London in 2005, claiming he could not have participated in Banaz's murder. However, UK Social Security records proved that he had been receiving refugee benefits at that time, contradicting his statement. In March 2010, Hussein was extradited and later sentenced to life imprisonment. Donna Ammon, who had been in the house during Banaz's murder, received an 8-year prison sentence for assisting in disposing of the body and obstructing justice. A recorded police interview revealed her family's culpability. Banaz had attempted to leave her abusive husband several times, but returned repeatedly under her family's pressure. The police's failure to protect her ultimately resulted in her death, prompting major reforms in how honor killings are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched, and 9 officers were prosecuted for their inadequate response. 7 received formal reprimands, while 2 were dismissed. Caroline Good, a persistent detective, not only located Banaz's body, but also secured the convictions of her father and uncle and ensured the extradition of the fugitives from Iraq. Sadly, these achievements could not restore Banaz's life or change the fact that her own relatives, those who should have safeguarded her, were the ones responsible for her murder. Banaz was laid to rest at the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morton. A memorial service took place on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by the placement of a granite memorial headstone at her gravesite. Her family did not attend either of the services. The memorial was funded by the law enforcement officers who worked on Banaz's case and by a women's rights organization. Rahmat Soleimani, Banaz's boyfriend, remained in the United Kingdom under the Witness Protection Program but never recovered from her death. In May 2016, 10 years after the crime, he hanged himself, marking his third suicide attempt. The full scope of the issue concerning police mishandling of honor crimes remains unclear due to the absence of mandatory reporting requirements. However, estimates indicate that in 2000, around 5,000 honor killings occurred globally, and in 2010, over 20,800 cases of honor-based violence were reported in Iran and Kurdistan. Such crimes typically target women who are believed to have brought shame upon their families or communities. Most of these cases take place in South Asia or the Middle East, primarily within Muslim societies. However, incidents like that of 19-year-old Banaz Mahmood, a Kurdish woman living in Britain, underscore the struggles faced by immigrant communities as they adapt to evolving lifestyles. Some organizations estimate that thousands of honor crimes remain unreported within Britain's minority communities, where women are frequently taken abroad and forced into marriage or harmed when their modern attitudes clash with their traditional male-dominated environments. Banaz Mahmood, murdered in 2006, stands as a tragic example of this reality. Her older sister, Bikal, urges other women in similar circumstances not to hesitate to seek help before it becomes too late. Even today, Bikal lives in constant fear for her safety, concealing her identity beneath a long black veil that covers her entire body and face except for her eyes. The story of Banaz Mahmood serves as a grim reminder that women who attempt to escape or live secretly remain in perpetual fear of discovery and punishment. The Metropolitan Police Unit that investigated Banaz's murder and brought her killers to justice received an award for excellence in detective investigation. A pivotal piece of evidence was a videotape capturing Banaz's anxious testimony, in which she recounted the abuse and oppression inflicted by her violent husband and the harassment she endured from men in her community. She warned that her death was imminent due to the shame she had supposedly brought upon her family. Tragically, her warnings were disregarded, and she was ultimately killed. Moving on to the next case. Christy Wilson. Christy Wilson was born on January 10, 1978, in San Jose, California. She attended Gunderson High School and later obtained a business degree from California State University, Chico. Her parents, Debbie Boyd and Patrick Boyd, described her as both an outstanding student and a talented athlete. After finishing college, Christy secured employment at a tech company near Sacramento, where she worked until the high-tech industry downturn resulted in her losing her job. In her spare time, she enjoyed playing blackjack at a nearby casino, where she met her boyfriend, Danny Berlando. At first, Christy's relationship with Danny was quite harmonious, and her family and friends believed they made an ideal couple. However, things began to deteriorate after they moved in together in Sacramento. Christy started appearing with bruises, but she refused to explain how she got them. After losing her job, Christy returned to her parents' home in San Jose. She later received a job offer in San Francisco and decided to make a fresh start. On October 4, 2005, Christy Wilson traveled to Sacramento to collect the rest of her belongings. However, just 2 days later, her boyfriend, Danny Berlando, contacted her parents to report that she was missing. He claimed that he had already searched for her by calling local jails, hospitals, and friends before finally reaching out to them. The police were soon notified about Christy's disappearance. According to Danny, Christy had visited his apartment on October 4th. Afterward, he went to dinner with his family while Christy headed to the Thunder Valley Casino. That was the last time he claimed to have seen her. It is worth noting that Danny's family did not get along with Christy, which explained why he attended the family dinner without her. The tension between the families stemmed from concerns about Christy's well-being. Her family had noticed bruises on her body, suggesting that Danny had been physically abusive. Christy's stepfather, Patrick Boyd, was deeply angered upon learning about the abuse and wanted to confront Danny, but her mother, Debbie Boyd, intervened to prevent the situation from escalating. At the time of Christy's disappearance, Danny Berlando was 31 years old and had recently lost his job as a car salesman. About a month before she went missing, police had been called to their residence after neighbors reported hearing Christy screaming. Although officers discovered that the couple had been arguing, the two quickly reconciled and no further action was taken. When Christie vanished, Danny became the primary suspect due to their prior altercation. His decision to wait nearly 48 hours before reporting her missing to the police raised suspicions that he might have used that time to destroy evidence. However, Danny cooperated fully with investigators, allowing them to examine his phone records, credit card transactions, computer, apartment, and car. Despite being under suspicion, no concrete evidence of foul play was discovered. Danny also had an alibi for the time Christie disappeared, as he had been attending a family dinner. Before reporting her missing, Danny tried to contact Christie 78 times, but she did not respond. The police interviewed Christie's friends and family and examined her phone and credit card records, but found no activity on her bank account after October 4th. Christie's family and the police worked closely together to locate her. They conducted searches in the area using dogs, volunteers, and a police helicopter. Her family urged the public to come forward with any information about Christie's whereabouts. Danny also searched for Christie independently and went to Thunder Valley Casino. The casino staff were unable to provide him with any useful details. However, he discovered Christie's car still parked in the casino's lot. Investigators soon arrived at the casino and confirmed that Christie's car remained in the parking lot. This finding created more confusion than answers, as there were no signs of a struggle or anything suspicious around the vehicle. The main questions became whether Christie had left the casino voluntarily and why her car was still there. Detectives reviewed the casino's surveillance footage, both inside and outside, hoping to determine what had occurred. At the same time, the police carried out another search of Christie and Danny's apartment, but it produced no results. Meanwhile, Christie's stepfather, Patrick, who was a police officer, organized a search of a nearby river, but nothing was found. The investigation then shifted its focus to Thunder Valley Casino, where Christie had last been seen. By using her player's card, investigators traced her movements and discovered that she had been playing blackjack at around 11 p.m. Security footage showed Christie seated at a table with a man, but Danny was not present. The man and Christie appeared to be conversing, celebrating their wins and consoling each other after losses. They spent roughly 6 hours together at the casino, during which the man was seen placing his hand on Christie's shoulder. Christie had a mixed night. She started strong, winning several rounds and keeping track of the cards carefully. However, as the night went on, her luck changed, and she began to lose. After having several drinks, Christie became more agitated and lost her composure. The casino staff eventually asked her to leave, but the man stepped in and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this beauty." Shortly afterward, the man and Christie were seen on camera leaving the casino together. During a later visit to Thunder Valley, detectives made an important discovery when casino employees located a mobile phone under a blackjack table. The phone belonged to Christie, and it was likely that she had dropped it without realizing. This discovery disrupted the police's plan to track Christie's location using her phone. Further examination of the CCTV footage revealed that Christie and the man she had met at the casino left the blackjack table and went to the parking lot 4 minutes later. A white vehicle, later identified as belonging to the man, was seen leaving the parking area while Christie's car remained parked. Detectives, however, suspected that Christie might have departed with the man in his vehicle. The police needed to establish whether Christie had gone with him voluntarily or if she had been coerced into the car. After analyzing player card data, investigators identified the man as Mario Flavio Garcia, a 53-year-old family man from Auburn who held a successful position in the IT field. As the investigation advanced, detectives confirmed that the white car visible in the CCTV footage was indeed owned by Mario Garcia, making him the chief suspect in Christie's disappearance. However, the video showed Mario appearing to be alone in the car as he exited the parking lot, and Christie was never seen returning to her own vehicle. Mario had remained in the parking area for 3 minutes and 41 seconds, raising concerns about what might have transpired between him and Christie during that brief period. When detectives delved into Mario Garcia's background, they discovered a sharp contrast between his public image and his private conduct. Although he was regarded as a respected community member and youth football coach, he also harbored a troubling past. 25 years earlier, Mario had been arrested for kidnapping his ex-girlfriend, taking her to a remote location, and forcing her to perform a sexual act at gunpoint. Despite the seriousness of the offense, the case was plea bargained down to assault with a deadly weapon, and he received a remarkably light sentence of only 18 months of probation. This was not the sole occasion when Mario had come to the attention of law enforcement. In another case, Mario had been in a volatile relationship with Lynette Smith. In 1979, Mario, Lynette, and her mother, Violet Davis, spent Christmas together. After dinner, the three got into Lynette's car, which later crashed into a river near Oakland Airport. Mario, the only survivor, claimed Lynette had been driving, but investigators were unable to confirm this assertion. Violet Davis's body was discovered inside the vehicle, while Lynette's remains were not recovered until a week later. The incident was initially deemed accidental, and no charges were filed in connection with the deaths. After compiling all the available evidence, investigators interviewed Mario regarding Christy Wilson. He insisted that he knew nothing about her disappearance, explaining that they had left the casino together, exchanged goodbyes politely, and gone their separate ways. Although he claimed to have driven straight home afterward, his statement could neither be confirmed nor disproven through the casino's surveillance footage. However, by reviewing security recordings from surrounding areas, investigators determined that Mario had lied. CCTV footage outside the casino captured Mario going in the opposite direction of the route he claimed to have taken after they parted ways. Mario stated that he had gone straight home and fallen asleep at 8:30 a.m. after leaving the casino. However, his wife refused to assist the police, preventing detectives from confirming his alibi. An examination of Mario's cell phone records exposed inconsistencies in his account. A call made to his wife at 7:51 a.m. came from a cell tower far from his residence, showing that he did not go home right after leaving the casino. Mario also asserted that he reached work at 9 a.m., but a co-worker stated that he arrived late, closer to 10 a.m. Further inquiries showed that Mario had scratches on his arm and a bruise under one eye the day following Christy Wilson's disappearance. When asked about them, Mario explained that the injuries were caused by a fall from a tree while pruning. However, detectives doubted this explanation since it was improbable for anyone to prune trees during the night. Police requested a forensic specialist to assess Mario Garcia's wounds. The specialist determined that the scratches on Mario's face and body did not resemble injuries resulting from a fall from a tree. There were 4 parallel scratches on his face, and 3 more on the left side of his chest. This detail was suspicious because Christy Wilson was right-handed. The police believed Mario was connected to Christy's disappearance, prompting them to obtain a search warrant for his vehicle, residence, and computer. Mario had claimed he went home after saying goodbye to Christy in the parking lot, but as investigators examined his car, they began to suspect Christy was likely dead. Mario had attempted to clean his car, washing both its interior and exterior, and even discarding the trunk mat. However, he had not succeeded in removing all traces of evidence. At first, investigators discovered a tiny, inconspicuous stain on the car seat, later confirmed to be blood. However, the sample was not viable for DNA testing. Additional analysis of the car uncovered 2 long strands of hair and small blood stains on the rear door of the trunk. The hairs were identified as belonging to the missing woman, Christy. Further testing of the bloodstains revealed that they contained DNA from both Mario and Christy, contradicting Mario's claim that they had separated in the parking lot. This evidence indicated a physical confrontation between Mario and Christy. A review of Mario's internet history disclosed that he had been studying forensic toxicology and browsing sites explaining how to secretly add drugs to someone's drink during a date. This caused investigators to suspect that Christy might have been an unsuspecting victim chosen by Mario after they met at a table. It was possible that Mario had drugged her drink. To substantiate this theory, the police needed to locate Christy's body. An extensive search of Garcia's 5-acre property was carried out, but regrettably, no additional leads were uncovered. Mario Garcia was apprehended and charged with kidnapping and murder, despite the fact that Christy Wilson's body remained missing. He continued to assert his innocence throughout the trial, which commenced on September 11, 2006. Prosecutors introduced evidence indicating that Mario had encountered Christy at a blackjack table, departed the casino with her, assaulted and killed her, and subsequently hid her body. During the proceedings, Mario challenged the credibility of the evidence, emphasizing that only Christy's DNA was detected on his car door, while no DNA belonging to his family members or others who had been inside the car was found. He contended that the police had planted Christie's DNA as false evidence. Mario told the court that he would not seek leniency or a pardon, insisting that he was innocent and had not committed the crime. Nevertheless, the jury found him guilty on January 11, 2007, and he was sentenced to 59 years to life in prison. Following the sentencing, Christie's family clung to the hope that Mario Garcia would ultimately disclose the location of her body. However, he refused to cooperate. Over the years, the family found it difficult to rebuild their lives, which had been permanently scarred by the ordeal. Mario's repeated appeals, though unsuccessful, only deepened their suffering. The ongoing legal proceedings deprived the family of closure and hindered their ability to move forward. In 2018, Mario proposed to share information about Christie's body in exchange for an early release from prison. However, Christie's mother, Debbie Boyd, refused to engage in any negotiations with him. She believed that treating her daughter's remains as a bargaining tool was intolerable. The police subsequently sought help from Mario's family, being aware that his ex-wife, Jean, had divorced him following his incarceration. Jean ultimately lost trust in her former husband and began to suspect that he had indeed been responsible for Christie's disappearance and death. As part of the renewed investigation, detectives questioned Mario Garcia's sons, Chris and Andy, requesting them to recall any memories from the days around Christie's disappearance and their father's subsequent arrest. The police were especially focused on identifying any unusual changes in Mario's behavior during that period. Chris recalled that he had a football game around that time and remembered seeing his father working feverishly on a tractor on their property. Mario's eyes appeared wild and frantic, something that startled Chris. When Chris asked his father to attend his game, Mario flatly declined, saying he would not go. This reaction struck Chris as completely out of character for him. At the investigators' request, Chris accompanied them to his childhood home. He pointed out the exact area where he had observed his father using the tractor, which was located next to a detached garage near the road, about 100 yards from the Garcia residence. It became evident that Mario had gone to great lengths to eliminate evidence, taking advantage of the 4 or 5 days he had before authorities intervened. Significantly, police had previously searched the Garcia property with cadaver dogs in 2005 but had discovered nothing at the time. In a major breakthrough, investigators adopted a new strategy in August 2020. They hired a company specializing in ground-penetrating radar technology to examine Mario Garcia's 5-acre property. The technicians identified 8 potential sites containing underground voids or anomalies. After excavating the first 2 areas without success, they proceeded to the 3rd site, the same spot where Mario Garcia had been seen operating the tractor, and unearthed a skeleton. Subsequent forensic analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Christy Wilson, 15 years after her disappearance. Although the precise cause of Christie's death remains uncertain, experts concluded that she had sustained a broken arm and a fractured nose. The investigators, who had dedicated 15 years to the case, traveled to Arizona to personally notify Christie's mother, Debbie Boyd, of the discovery. The news evoked both sorrow and relief for Christie's family, who were finally able to gain closure and bid farewell to their daughter. Placer County Sheriff Devin Bell declared that Christy Wilson's case had been resolved due to the persistent efforts of his team. This success was achieved without the assistance of Mario Garcia, a convicted murderer currently serving his sentence in prison. Mario, age 67, had declined to share any information that could help the family attain closure. According to Christie's mother, Debbie Boyd, the revelation brought peace to her family and symbolized the conclusion of a painful chapter in their lives. She commended the determination of law enforcement and expressed gratitude for their unwavering dedication. Significantly, Mario had passed away from pneumonia in 2020, and even his death provided the family with a sense of peace. Mario had never admitted guilt or accepted responsibility for Christie's disappearance, despite her remains being uncovered on his property in 2005. Moving on to the next case. Harvey family. On that Sunday afternoon in January 2006, a man and his daughter visited a friend's family home for a New Year's gathering. He noticed the door was open, which was typical for a party. Upon entering, he saw thick smoke, alerted others, and called the authorities. Firefighters arrived, extinguished the fire, but tragically discovered the lifeless bodies of the Harveys. What initially appeared to be a fire soon became a murder investigation, leaving investigators both shocked and perplexed. 49-year-old Brian Taba Harvey, a local figure, had gained recognition in the 1980s as the singer-songwriter for the underground indie band House of Freaks. Although he had ended his professional partnership with Johnny Hott in the 1990s, the two remained close friends. Brian, a dedicated musician, performed for the final time at a New Year's Eve show, which, unbeknownst to him, would be the last night of his life. 39-year-old Catherine Elizabeth Grabinski found success as co-owner of the popular toy store World of Mirth, located in Richmond's Carytown district. A respected community member, she was an artist engaged in various pursuits, from painting sets for community theater to working as a pastry chef and waitress. Catherine had an older sister, Shelley Grabinski, and was also the half-sister of actor Stephen Culp, known for roles in The West Wing, Desperate Housewives, and other productions. The paths of Brian and Catherine first crossed at the Border Cafe on Main Street, where Catherine worked and Brian frequently visited with Johnny. In 1990, they married, and the House of Freaks released an album that included a song dedicated to Catherine titled I Got Happy. The couple welcomed two daughters, Stella Ann, born in 1996, and Ruby May, born in 2001. While Brian continued his musical career, he also worked with computers for the Henrico County school system. Catherine, meanwhile, pursued entrepreneurship by opening World of Mirth, a distinctive toy and gift store that became a cornerstone of the fashionable Carytown neighborhood. Her brother, Stephen Culp, explained in court that she wanted to create a space where parents could spend time with their children, and where children could play with toys without any resembling weapons such as guns or swords. The Harvey family established their home in a stately, old neighborhood on the south side of Richmond, featuring large trees, porch swings, and ivy-covered surroundings. They had a family room in the basement of their two-story red brick house. The attractive family were well known and loved in the Richmond community, and no one really wished them harm, or so it seemed. On New Year's Day, Sunday 2006, Brian, his wife Catherine, and their two daughters, 9-year-old Stella and 4-year-old Ruby, expected a busy day ahead. Their plans included hosting a lunchtime barbecue for friends and relatives, which prompted them to rise early and prepare for the celebrations. It had become their custom to hold a party every New Year's Day, gathering their wide circle of friends for the occasion. That Sunday morning, Brian stepped outside their home in the fashionable Woodland Heights area of Richmond, Virginia, to fetch the newspaper. Absorbed in the headlines, he came back inside without locking the door. Because they lived in a relatively safe neighborhood, this ordinarily would not have been worrying. Typically, they also left the door unsecured on party days, keeping it open for arriving guests. However, on this morning, unknown to Brian, opportunistic criminals were lurking nearby. Catherine was busy in the kitchen making cookies for the expected guests who would arrive shortly. Without warning, she heard voices from the living room. Thinking someone had arrived early, she went to the living room only to be met not by friends, but by two unfamiliar men. In the tense moments that followed, Brian, Catherine, and little Ruby were forced downstairs to the basement playroom. Stella, who had spent the previous night at a slumber party, had not yet returned. Once the family were confined in the small room, the intruders used electrical cords and packing tape to bind them, ensuring compliance while they ransacked the house. About 10 a.m., a knock sounded at the front door. The apparent leader of the gang freed Catherine from her restraints and ordered her to deal with whoever was at the door. But before she was allowed to go, he issued a blunt warning. If she sought help or tried to escape, her husband and daughter would be killed, the imminent arrival of Stella used as leverage. A distressed Catherine found herself trapped in an impossible choice. Answering the door would expose her daughter to the same danger as the rest of the family, while refusing to answer risked the assailant's anger, who clearly held all the power. Ultimately, she decided that cooperation was the safest course of action, and with that decision, she opened the door. In an unexpected turn, Stella darted past Catherine and headed straight for the playroom where the family often spent time together. Acting quickly, Catherine intercepted her daughter's friend, preventing her from following. Karen Perkinson, the friend's mother, later recalled her surprise at Catherine's unusual behavior, which differed from her typical liveliness. When Perkinson asked about her well-being, Catherine, normally spirited, claimed she was unwell and gestured with a circular motion to the side of her head, mimicking a gun, suggesting someone might be considered crazy. She abruptly ended the conversation and closed the door. This strange gesture would later trouble Perkinson, who wondered if Catherine was trying to signal that she was being watched by the intruders, and whether she might have attempted an escape, potentially saving herself and Stella. However, the thought of leaving Brian and Ruby behind weighed heavily on Catherine. Perkinson left, intending to return later for the party. With all 4 members of the Harvey family now inside, Catherine returned to the basement and found a terrified Stella, who had been securely tied up along with the rest of the family. As everyone lay bound and vulnerable, chaos suddenly erupted. The man in charge produced a knife taken from the Harvey kitchen and began slashing their throats, including those of the young girls, expressing frustration that they were not dying quickly enough. He ordered his accomplice to bludgeon their heads, but the partner refused, prompting the assailant to grab a claw hammer and strike them repeatedly until they ceased moving. After removing Catherine Harvey's wedding ring, the assailants used wine as an accelerant to set the room on fire and conceal evidence of their horrific acts. As they fled the residence, they helped themselves to a plate of freshly baked cookies cooling on the kitchen counter and stole a laptop, DVD player, and various other items. Rushing out, they entered a getaway vehicle parked outside, where a woman in a relationship with one of the men acted as a lookout during what had initially been intended as a simple robbery. They quickly departed, leaving the scene as quietly as they had arrived. Around 1:30 p.m., Johnny Holt arrived for the celebratory gathering. Upon opening the front door, he was confronted by a dense cloud of smoke and alarmed by the strong odor of burning. He alerted the neighbors, who promptly called 911. When emergency responders entered the home and dealt with the fire, they tragically discovered 4 bodies in the smoldering basement, still intact. Investigators at the scene soon determined that the fire had not caused the victims' deaths. Rather, a far more sinister cause of death was revealed. The case had now escalated into a murder investigation. Police officers and paramedics, accustomed to witnessing the darkest aspects of humanity, were reportedly so disturbed by the harrowing scene that some openly wept. The knowledge that the parents had been forced to witness the brutal deaths of their children, and vice versa, was almost unimaginable. Autopsies revealed that Brian and Catherine had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Stella tragically succumbed to a combination of blunt force trauma and smoke inhalation, indicating that she was still alive when the fire began, despite her severe injuries. Ruby's death resulted from stab wounds to her neck and back. Despite launching an immediate investigation into the murders, authorities had little evidence. Recognizing that criminals sometimes reveal information, they appealed to the public for assistance. Their breakthrough arrived a few days later, on January 6th, when a woman named LaToya Pye contacted the police, requesting a welfare check on her friend, 21-year-old Ashley Basil. Pye expressed her concern that Ashley's boyfriend, 29-year-old Reed Joseph Dandridge, and his uncle, 29-year-old Ricky Javan Gray, were involved in the Harvey family murders. Ricky, slightly younger than his nephew by a few months, was reportedly the one in charge. The shocking revelations continued as Pye disclosed that the 2 men had stored evidence of their crimes at her residence. She revealed that Gray and Dandridge had recently visited her home with a laptop displaying an image of the Harveys as its wallpaper. By this time, the Harvey case had received extensive media coverage, leaving no doubt that the laptop belonged to the victims. Additionally, LaToya provided detailed information about a scheme devised by Ashley, Gray, and Dandridge to rob Ashley's parents. In the plan, Ashley was to pretend to be a hostage, allowing Ricky and Gray to extort money from the Basile Tuckers, making Ashley appear innocent, although she was aware of the entire plot and had been offered a role. LaToya refused to participate, growing suspicious of the trio. The uncle and nephew returned hours later alone. When asked about Ashley's whereabouts, they cryptically replied, "Ashley has gone bye-bye." This statement heightened LaToya's concern and prompted her to contact the police. It was this critical information that investigators needed to begin connecting the dots. Having verified LaToya's account, authorities proceeded to the residence where Ashley lived with her mother, 46-year-old Mary Basil Tucker, and stepfather, 55-year-old Purcell Tucker. To their horror, they were met with another grisly scene. Upon entering the home, they discovered the lifeless bodies of all 3 victims, who had been subjected to a brutal fate similar to that of the Harvey family. The victims were bound, gagged, and had their throats ruthlessly slit. Duct tape wound tightly around their heads caused additional suffering for Mary and Purcell, both of whom displayed deep neck lacerations. Purcell had a sock forcibly stuffed into his mouth, and Ashley was tragically found suffocated with a plastic bag. The cause of death for all three was determined to be suffocation and torture. Suspecting the killers might still be at large, law enforcement agencies from across the region collaborated to apprehend them before further atrocities could occur. Harvey, Purcell, and Mary had led quiet, peaceful lives with no known enemies. Purcell worked as a forklift operator, while Mary was employed in housekeeping. Their tranquil existence was shattered by the betrayal of their own daughter, culminating in the tragic deaths of an innocent couple simply attempting to enjoy their retirement years. Investigators quickly identified the crucial link between the Harvey and Tucker cases. Ashley was discovered wearing Brian Harvey's wedding ring, the same one missing and taken from Catherine. With this revelation, urgent action was required to capture Gray and Dandridge before they could inflict further harm. Authorities traced their movements back to their home state of Pennsylvania, and Gray and Dandridge were apprehended in Philadelphia on January 7th. During questioning, Dandridge claimed that the murders had been orchestrated by his uncle and that he had merely followed instructions. Confronted with these incriminating statements, Gray readily admitted to the killings of the Harveys and acknowledged his involvement in the deaths of Ashley and her parents. Although these straightforward confessions were shocking, it soon became clear that this was only the beginning. Gray provided gruesome, detailed accounts of both family massacres, emphasizing that their actions were motivated entirely by the pursuit of money. During the Harvey family murders, Gray, unbeknownst to anyone, was under the influence of PCP, a drug known to induce auditory and visual hallucinations as well as violent behavior. Throughout his confession, Gray maintained a chilling, emotionless stare, and his utter indifference toward the lives he took led investigators to believe they were confronting evil incarnate. It was also revealed that Gray was responsible for the murder of his wife, Trevor Terrell Gray, whose body was found in a shallow grave on Brookside Avenue in Washington, Pennsylvania. The couple had been married for 6 months before her murder and lived in a house owned by Trevor's family, along with Gray's nephew, Rarai. According to Trevor's parents, the Grays frequently engaged in bitter arguments, and claw marks on Rarai's forearm were discovered on the day Trevor's body was found. Despite interviews conducted by Washington police, neither Gray nor Dandridge were initially considered suspects. Trevor's mother, Maina Squires, alleged that law enforcement assumed Trevor had died of a drug overdose, resulting in a lackadaisical investigation. Although Trevor's death was considered suspicious at the time, a homicide investigation was only launched following Gray's confession in 2006. On December 31, 2005, a brutal assault occurred in which 26-year-old Ryan Kai was attacked by 2 men in front of his parents' Arlington home, later identified as Gray and Dandridge. The assault left Kai with severe beatings and stab wounds to his chest, neck, and arms, resulting in a near-fatal attack that left him in a coma for 2 weeks and caused permanent loss of use of his right arm. On February 9, 2006, Ricky Gray faced 5 counts of capital murder, while Ray Dandridge was indicted on 3 counts of murder for his involvement in the Baskerville-Tucker killings. Despite their prior admissions, both men pleaded not guilty. Following a 6-month trial, the jury found Gray guilty on all counts, resulting in a life sentence for the murders of Brian and Catherine Harvey. In response to the brutal deaths of Stella and Ruby, the court deemed a death sentence appropriate. In September 2006, following his uncle's conviction and upon learning his own verdict, Dandridge accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty and received a life sentence without parole. In December 2006, Ricky Gray faced charges in Chesterfield County for the murder of Cheryl Warner, a 37-year-old legal secretary and mother of 3, who was found shot and hanged by an electrical cord in the basement of her Burning Beaver residence. Gray pleaded not guilty, but on June 4, 2008, the charge was suspended due to conflicting evidence. Over the next 9 years, Gray's legal team filed numerous appeals, primarily arguing diminished capacity due to an abusive childhood. The case reached the Supreme Court, which summarily rejected it in 2016. In November 2016, Gray's execution was scheduled for January 18, 2017. On that date, with all appeals exhausted, Ricky Gray was executed by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center. Ray Dandridge remains incarcerated at Sussex State Prison. The brutal murders of the Harvey family unleashed a wave of horror and sorrow, with over 1,400 people attending their memorial service to express condolences and grief. Flowers and dolls piled up along the curb outside the red brick house, forming a poignant tribute. Children placed candles that remained lit for weeks. A neighbor reflected on the community's mourning, noting that the candles stayed alight for weeks. Catherine's brother, Culp, testified about the profound impact of the murders, describing them as a lightning bolt to the heart that felt bottomless. He also expressed anguish over the Harvey family's final hours. In Richmond's Forest Hill Park, an entrance to a footbridge is marked by a granite monument, a poignant dedication to the Harvey family. This family, who had enjoyed many joyful moments at the site, had their lives abruptly and tragically cut short. A bronze plaque depicting their radiant smiles commemorates happier days before unspeakable evil entered their lives and destroyed everything. It is a tragic and unfortunate tale, and our thoughts remain with the victims whose lives were cruelly ended and the loved ones they left behind. Moving on to the next case. Jessica Callery. Jessica Callery, the second daughter of Rita and Vince, an Australian Maltese couple, was born with a mild intellectual disability. Her IQ ranged between 55 and 60, placing her within the bottom 1% of the population. Individuals with mild intellectual disabilities like Jessica are capable of communicating and expressing themselves, but their development occurs at a slower pace. They may take longer to acquire essential skills such as speaking, reading, writing, and mathematics, yet they can still adapt to the routines of daily life. Due to her condition, Jessica was delayed in achieving developmental milestones such as walking, talking, and developing coordination. She began school significantly later than her peers, which made her an easy target for teasing, discomfort, and bullying from classmates who viewed her as different. As a result, Jessica developed stress, anxiety, and deep-seated anger, particularly directed toward females. She also suffered from intermittent explosive disorder, characterized by sudden and repeated episodes of impulsive, aggressive, and violent behavior, as well as verbal outbursts far out of proportion to the situation. At school, Jessica's aggression extended toward both students and teachers, including one notable incident in which she punched a male classmate and refused to let go, leading to her indefinite suspension and subsequent confinement at home under the care of her mother, Rita, who received a disability pension to support them. Jessica's behavioral issues were manifestations of her intellectual disability and her difficulty managing irrational anger. Additionally, she was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, a chronic neurological condition affecting millions of children globally, which made it even more challenging for her to control her impulses. Alongside these struggles, Jessica suffered from severe bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and autism spectrum disorder, all of which impaired her judgment, self-awareness, and capacity for empathy. She also exhibited obsessive tendencies, particularly her fixation on her three favorite numbers, 2, 3, and 5, each of which she associated with specific colors, yellow, green, and purple, respectively. Jessica frequently repeated these numbers to create random phone numbers, which she would then call to initiate conversations with men. In one instance, beginning in 2018, she started harassing employees of a meat company in Daylesford, England, going so far as to threaten the owner's family and claim she would decapitate them with a chainsaw. Jessica possessed a deep and unsettling fascination with horror films, especially the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She would spend countless hours rewatching disturbing videos, and her obsession often provoked furious outbursts whenever her mother, Rita, attempted to restrict her access to them. Jessica and her mother lived together in their home in St. Clair, a suburb of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Jessica's father, Vince, had separated from Rita during her teenage years because of the pressure their daughter's behavioral issues had placed on their marriage. Jessica suffered from low self-esteem and maintained a childish, naive mindset, yet she also showed pronounced narcissistic traits. Deep within, she believed she was unique and deserving of special treatment because of her mental disability. This sometimes caused her to behave selfishly and manipulatively. Nevertheless, Rita stayed committed to caring for her daughter, recognizing her problems but feeling a deep obligation to protect and look after her. Rita even took the step of contacting and apologizing to one of the people who had received Jessica's harassing phone calls, admitting that she no longer knew how to handle her daughter's conduct. Jessica was extremely attached to her mother, who devoted her entire life to supporting her and fulfilling all her needs. Instead of placing her in a psychiatric institution for permanent care, Rita decided to keep her at home. In fact, Rita's life centered entirely around Jessica. The tragic event of July 20th, 2019, was not an isolated case. In the 6 years prior, Jessica had been found guilty twice of assaults resulting in actual bodily harm. She had also physically attacked her aunt and her sister's mother-in-law by pulling their hair. However, she escaped imprisonment and was consistently entrusted to the care of her mother, Rita, the only person capable of enduring her behavior. Jessica had also demonstrated violent tendencies towards women she encountered in public places such as streets and shopping centers, lashing out at those she felt stared at her or made her feel humiliated. On one occasion, she was even banned from a doctor's clinic after becoming aggressive toward another patient in the waiting area out of paranoia. In early 2018, Jessica's violent conduct persisted when she assaulted a nurse during a hospital visit with her mother Rita. Consequently, she was admitted for 9 days to a mental health unit to address a severe mood disorder episode. She was prescribed lithium for her alleged bipolar disorder, along with antipsychotic drugs. Yet, by late 2018, approximately 6 months before the tragic event, Jessica discontinued her medications and turned instead to natural remedies to cope with her symptoms. Rita, driven to desperation, spent $2,500 on a medium located on Queen Street in St. Mary's, a western Sydney suburb, in an attempt to banish the demon she believed was possessing her daughter Jessica. Despite being cautioned by relatives and friends about the risks of living with Jessica, Rita remained steadfast in her belief that her daughter would not harm anyone. According to Christy, Jessica's elder sister, their mother Rita possessed a heart of gold, always prioritizing others over herself, including Jessica, who persistently refused to pursue professional treatment. Rita's sister frequently expressed her fears that Jessica might harm Rita, fully aware of Rita's unwavering affection for her daughter. However, Rita's maternal devotion made her blind to these cautions, even the day before the horrific attack when she had to bring Jessica to a police station because of her threatening phone calls to strangers. Jessica felt embarrassed by her mother in a parking lot after visiting her sister, triggered by a brief encounter with a stranger. Later, when Rita declined to order food from Red Rooster, Jessica called the restaurant 3 times. She then insisted that her mother contact a doctor, but Jessica's unstable behavior frightened him away. Ultimately, Rita called an ambulance to have Jessica taken to a mental health facility. On the night of July 20th, 2019, Jessica's most violent outburst of fury was about to occur. In a savage assault, Jessica dragged her 57-year-old mother, Rita, by the hair into the kitchen of their home. There, she viciously attacked Rita with 7 meat cleavers, 4 of which snapped under the intensity of her strikes. Altogether, Jessica stabbed Rita more than 100 times in the head and neck, driven by a gruesome fascination stemming from her daily fixation on horror movies. The autopsy disclosed the full extent of Rita's injuries, including severe trauma to her head and neck and death caused by multiple stab wounds that led to decapitation at the second vertebra in her upper neck. Moreover, Rita's body bore over 90 defensive wounds, signifying that she remained conscious through much of the assault. Enduring immense physical pain and emotional terror at the hands of her own daughter, whom she had cared for so lovingly, Rita was not alone during the ordeal. Jessica's 4-year-old nephew, the son of her older sister Christy, was present throughout the attack. The child had been staying with Rita for a few days because Jessica seemed to be improving. However, he was forced to witness Jessica repeatedly stabbing his grandmother and ultimately decapitating her. When the boy attempted to intervene, Jessica assaulted him, inflicting a minor head wound. The horrific event was so traumatizing that the young child began to vomit in distress. Jessica then called the emergency number using her mother Rita's phone, admitting to the murder but falsely claiming self-defense, alleging that Rita had attacked her first. In truth, this was entirely false, and Jessica was the one who had perpetrated the savage killing. In reality, after murdering her mother, Jessica panicked and continued stabbing Rita's lifeless body, eventually decapitating her and inflicting over 100 injuries. She then placed Rita's severed head in a neighbor's front yard nearby. When the police reached their St. Clair, Sydney residence, Jessica was outside, her clothing drenched in her mother's blood, holding a water bottle. She displayed no regret for her crime and appeared more preoccupied with her own situation. Jessica asked the officers and detectives whether it was possible to revive someone after decapitation, genuinely believing in the potential for medical miracles capable of reattaching her mother's head. The police officer replied that such a notion was unrealistic, but Jessica persisted, believing that doctors were capable of performing miraculous surgeries and could reattach her mother's head. She also asked about the possible repercussions of her actions, specifically whether she would face the death penalty. Upon being informed that Australia no longer practiced capital punishment, Jessica expressed relief. Additionally, Jessica admitted to the police that the idea of decapitating her mother was inspired by the horror movies she obsessively watched. A police officer's body camera captured a chilling exchange at the crime scene on July 20, 2019, at 11:43 p.m. The first responders later described the scene as among the most horrific they had ever encountered. The following day, July 21, 2019, Jessica appeared in court but did not seek bail. A friend remarked that this was unsurprising, as Jessica likely did not comprehend how the bail process worked. After a trial that underscored her long-standing history of mental illness, Jessica was convicted of manslaughter in December 2020. She had pleaded not guilty to murder on the grounds of her disability. In early 2021, Jessica was sentenced to a maximum term of 21 years and 7 months in prison. She will be eligible for parole after serving 16 years and 2 months, which will be on September 19, 2035. The prosecution argued that Rita's gruesome murder represented the peak of a lifetime of worsening violence from Jessica, beginning with hair-pulling incidents and culminating in a deadly, explosive assault. The prosecutor further asserted that Jessica posed a moderate to high risk of reoffending and continued to be a threat to society. Christy, Jessica's elder sister, declared that Jessica had slaughtered and dismembered their mother, an act for which she could never offer forgiveness. However, Rita's sister expressed a contrasting perspective, hoping that Jessica would receive the treatment she desperately needed and that Rita could finally rest in peace, assured that Jessica was now being cared for by a system that had failed her during her lifetime. The presiding judge extended counseling services to the jury, acknowledging that the harrowing evidence they had been exposed to might haunt them long after the trial concluded. The judge also admitted that selecting a jury for Jessica's case had proven challenging, as many prospective jurors were reluctant to serve in a case involving such a deeply disturbing crime. The judge described Rita's murder as one of the most vicious and heartless homicides ever brought before a court, emphasizing that the brutality was intensified by the fact that it occurred in the victim's own home. Jessica's attorney disclosed that his client had written a letter to her family after the killing, expressing remorse. In that letter, Jessica took full responsibility for her mother's death, admitting that Rita had done nothing to provoke her and accepting blame for her actions. Nevertheless, one of the psychiatrists who assessed Jessica observed that she had difficulty expressing herself through social cues and exhibited a generally flat emotional response. The psychiatrist found no signs of schizophrenia or hallucinations in Jessica. The conclusion reached was that Jessica's risk factors could only be controlled over the long term through a comprehensive mental health care plan. Since her incarceration, Jessica has continuously caused disturbances. Merely 2 months after her imprisonment, on September 9, 2019, she engaged in a physical altercation with another inmate over food trading and hurled a teacup at them. Although she was charged with assault in the local court the following day, she did not face any additional penalty. On October 14, 2019, Jessica attacked another prisoner, resulting in her placement in solitary confinement for 5 days. On November 3, 2019, she defied an order, and on July 31, 2020, she caused property damage, receiving a fine of $200 Australian dollars. Jessica was involved in yet another assault on November 21, 2020, which led to her being confined in isolation for 7 days. In January 2021, she was again found guilty of common assault, but did not receive further disciplinary measures. Jessica explained her actions by claiming that other inmates constantly make her life unbearable, no matter what she does or where she goes. She also stated that life in prison is extremely difficult and entirely unlike the outside world. On May 15, 2023, Justice Peter Hamill of the Sydney Supreme Court dismissed arguments that Callari's initial sentence had been excessively severe or that the sentencing judge had misjudged the gravity of her crime. However, Justice Hamill did rule that Callary should be resentenced, a decision that was supported by Justices Christine Adamson and Richard Kavanaugh. The reasoning behind this judgment was Callary's bizarre conduct, which included walking into the street, holding her mother's head, and asking emergency personnel whether it could be reattached, illustrating how detached from reality her actions were. After evaluating the assessments of several psychiatrists and a psychologist, Justice Hamill determined that Callery's intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder meant she possessed only a limited grasp of moral wrongdoing. Consequently, he ordered that she be resentenced to a total of 16 years in prison, with a minimum non-parole period of 12 years before becoming eligible for release. Moving on to the next case. Sabrina Payne. In the summer of 2003, the body of 36-year-old Sabrina Payne was discovered in a field near Tremont, Illinois. Sabrina, a black woman, was known to support her drug addiction through prostitution. She had last been seen at her home 2 days before her body was found. The initial autopsy failed to determine a cause of death, leading some detectives to believe she had overdosed. However, one detective remained uneasy with that assumption. His suspicions were confirmed as additional bodies were discovered in Peoria and Tazewell counties over the following year. On February 5, 2004, the body of 36-year-old Barbara Williams was found in a ditch near Edwards, Illinois. She was partially clothed and lying face down in the snow. Barbara had last been seen alive between 9 and 10 p.m. the night before. An autopsy revealed multiple contusions and abrasions on her body. Toxicology results showed that Barbara had fatal levels of cocaine in her bloodstream. At that time, police were hesitant to label her death a homicide or to consider the possibility of a serial killer targeting black women struggling with drug addiction and prostitution. In October 2004, 32-year-old Shakonda Thomas was reported missing. She had last been seen by her family in August. Although Shakonda was known to disappear for periods of time, her family became alarmed when she failed to return after several weeks and reported her missing. Similarly, Shirley Trapp was reported missing in late summer 2004, having last been seen 3 days prior to her disappearance. Another woman, Tamara Walls, was reported missing in September 2004 after being unseen for 3 weeks. All 3 missing women were also black females who supported their crack cocaine addiction through prostitution. 36-year-old mother of 8, Laura Lawler, vanished from her home after leaving with a man and a woman. Her longtime partner searched relentlessly for her and managed only to learn that she had last been seen with a man named Larry. Laura's boyfriend, who was also the father of her 7 daughters and 1 son, described her as the love of his life and a beautiful soul. The two had experimented with crack cocaine, and Laura struggled with addiction before her disappearance. On September 25, 2004, Linda Neal's body was found on King Road in Tazewell County. She was discovered nude along the roadside. Like the other victims, Linda was known to be involved in Peoria's drug scene. By this time, police had concluded that a serial killer was likely targeting black women in the Peoria area. A special task force was established, though one detective noted that such action would have likely occurred much sooner if the victims had been white women. While investigators urgently searched for the perpetrator, they also kept a vigilant watch over women in the community deemed at risk. Despite these efforts, on October 15, 2004, the body of Brenda Irving was discovered in a ditch near Farmington. Brenda was found nude, and an autopsy determined that she had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to the head. She also had fatal levels of cocaine in her system. Her children had long feared for her safety, as Brenda personally knew several of the women who had disappeared or been killed throughout central Illinois. Brenda struggled with drug addiction. Despite detectives' best efforts, the case proved challenging to solve. They followed thousands of leads, but finally got the break they were waiting for in December 2004. 35-year-old Vicky Bomer was arrested for theft. From jail, she informed authorities that she believed she could help them identify the serial killer targeting her fellow sex workers. She claimed that a man who had picked her up in July 2004 was responsible. Bomer explained that in July, a man named Larry Bright had lured her to his mother's home, where they consumed alcohol and drugs together. Once she became intoxicated, she said Bright attacked her, attempted to rape her, and pulled a knife on her. Somehow, Bomer managed to escape. Initially, police were skeptical, as Bomer requested a plea deal in exchange for her testimony. They questioned why she hadn't reported the assault in July, and why she had waited until she was under arrest. Vicky Bomer stated that she was afraid of being detained for her outstanding warrants, which was why she hadn't come forward earlier. A search of her criminal history confirmed the warrants, prompting detectives to investigate the man named Larry Bright. Larry Dean Bright was born in Peoria, Illinois on July 8, 1966. At age 19, he served a 2-year prison sentence for burglary and carjacking. According to his family, the time Larry spent in prison changed him for the worse. He became angrier, more violent, and began using drugs. Larry sustained an injury that led to an addiction to prescription opioids and eventually crack cocaine. He also developed a pornography addiction, favoring videos featuring black women. Larry lived with his mother in a small guest house behind her home. He enjoyed gardening and created a beautiful flower bed for his mother. When police arrived at Larry's residence following Bomer's tip, they noticed the colorful garden. Larry was arrested for the unlawful restraint of Vicky. When questioned about the murders, he denied knowing anything about the missing and murdered women. During the interview, Larry smoked several cigarettes. Detectives planned to collect one of the cigarette butts for DNA testing, but Larry ate them before leaving the interrogation room. He refused to provide a voluntary DNA sample. On January 20, 2005, police executed a search warrant at Larry Bright's home. Investigators dug up the garden and found several small bone fragments and ashes, which were later confirmed to be human remains. When police questioned Larry again, they informed him that they were digging up his mother's flower bed. At that moment, Larry broke down and confessed to multiple murders, even leading investigators to the remains of some victims. Larry stated that around July 27, 2003, he picked up Sabrina Payne on the south side of Peoria. He drove her to the home he shared with his mother, where they drank alcohol and used cocaine before engaging in consensual sex. Larry claimed he did not plan to kill Sabrina, but he became enraged when he thought she was trying to steal from him. He strangled her to death and dumped her body near the cornfield where she was later found. Larry admitted to picking up Barbara Williams in February 2004, repeating a similar pattern of using drugs and alcohol with her. He said he again lost control of his anger and killed Barbara after accusing her of stealing from him. He dumped her body along the roadside, where it was discovered the following day. Prosecutors believed that after these first 2 murders, Larry developed an insatiable bloodlust. At the time of his arrest, Larry Bright stated, "I knew them. I would tell the others I would pick up. I went out hunting." Larry also confessed to killing Laura Lawler, whose body he burned in his backyard burn pit and buried the remains in his mother's yard. He claimed he destroyed the bodies to avoid detection. He admitted to killing Tamara Walls and burning her remains, with her jawbone later recovered from the yard. Larry confessed to strangling, beating, and burning Shirley Trapp, as well as killing Shakonda Thomas in the same manner after picking her up. Because of his methodical attempts to cremate his victims, he earned the nickname Bone Crusher. Larry admitted that he had also attempted to burn Linda Neal and Brenda Irving, but the weather prevented him from doing so. He disposed of both women's bodies along the roadside. Following his January 2005 arrest, Larry faced the death penalty. In an effort to spare his mother the embarrassment of a trial and avoid a death sentence, he pleaded guilty on May 30, 2006, to 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of drug-induced homicide. While his murders were not considered racially motivated, detectives noted that he specifically targeted black women, making him one of the few serial killers to choose victims outside his own race. Larry was sentenced to 7 life terms without the possibility of parole, to be served concurrently, along with an additional 30 years for the drug-induced homicide. As part of the plea agreement, he must serve 100% of his sentence with no chance of parole. Larry is currently incarcerated at the Shawnee Correctional Center in Vienna, Illinois. Though he will spend the rest of his life behind bars, this brings little solace to the families of his victims. They stress that the women he murdered were more than their struggles with addiction or involvement in prostitution. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends whose lives mattered. Meanwhile, in St. Louis, Dr. Glennon Engelman, known as the serial killer dentist, was born on February 6, 1927. He grew up on the city's south side, forming a strong attachment to his neighborhood. After serving in the military, Engelman used his GI Bill to attend Washington University and became a dentist. He opened a dental practice on the south side of St. Louis, serving the very community he cherished. Engelman, who went by Glenn, was married to Ebna Ruth, but they divorced in 1956, with both remarrying by 1958. By that time, Glenn was operating his dental office, and appeared to be a respected member of the St. Louis community. On December 17, 1958, however, citizens in Forest Park noticed a bloodied man stumbling through the area, marking the beginning of a disturbing chapter. The man, James Stanley Bullock, soon succumbed to his injuries, which were caused by a gunshot. No one could determine why someone would target 28-year-old James Bullock. He was born on April 17, 1931, in DeSoto, Illinois, and raised in Shiloh by his grandparents, later living with his aunt after his parents passed away. According to a 1938 article, the 7-year-old James was living with his grandparents, enjoying school and fishing. Later, he served in the military before returning to St. Louis to work and pursue higher education. While in St. Louis, James met Edna Ruth, the ex-wife of Dr. Glenn Engelman. The two married, but just 6 months later, James was dead. An employee at a local sanitarium initially claimed that James had sought admission 4 days prior to his murder, fearing for his life. However, his wife and aunt denied this, stating that the three had shared dinner together that night, and James had not expressed any fear. They knew of no enemies who might have wanted him dead. Nevertheless, Edna Ruth stood to gain significantly from his death, as she held life insurance policies totaling $64,088. During questioning, Edna Ruth made several strange statements, including claiming that she had been married before, though she never disclosed to whom. Police discovered she had previously been married to Dr. Glenn Engelman, James Bullock's dentist. She had misled James, his family, and the authorities, even lying on the marriage application about her prior marriage. Authorities also questioned a local career criminal who was on parole for assault at the time of James's shooting. While they could not link him directly to the murder, they noted he lived near Dr. Engelman's office. Both Dr. Engelman and Edna Ruth refused to take polygraph tests and denied involvement in James's death. Dr. Engelman's new wife, Ida, also refused to be questioned, though a patient later provided an alibi for him. Another witness, however, stated that attempts were made to locate someone at the dental office during a period when it appeared to be empty. Edna Ruth used a portion of the life insurance funds she received after becoming a widow to invest in Dr. Engelman's dental practice. Bored with dentistry, Dr. Engelman also pursued other business ventures, including buying a trike strip with a partner, Eric Fry. Dr. Engelman had become close friends with Eric and his wife, Sandy. On September 26, 1963, Eric and Dr. Engelman were at the trike strip using dynamite to demolish abandoned cisterns on the property. Tragically, Eric was lying on his stomach near one cistern when the dynamite exploded sooner than expected. He was killed instantly, found at the bottom of the cistern. Coroner H.D. Steinbeck ruled the death accidental. Sandy Fry, Eric's widow, held an insurance policy on her husband, part of which she invested into Dr. Engelman's dental practice. Dr. Engelman divorced Edna and married his third wife, Ruth, in 1967. The couple had a son, but Ruth grew uneasy over her husband's close relationship with a young woman in his office named Carmen Miranda. Dr. Engelman had offered to train Carmen as a dental assistant, and although he claimed his intentions were purely professional and meant to help people in the community, Ruth was uncomfortable with the apparent flirting. At one point, Dr. Engelman even hired Carmen's brother, Nick. Ruth initially felt relieved when Carmen began dating a married man named Peter Home. However, tragedy struck only a few months later. Carmen and Peter were walking in a rural area near Pacific, Missouri, exploring a region known for caves and scenic paths, when a shot was fired, striking Peter in the head and killing him instantly. Carmen ran for help in hysterics. Investigators found a hex made of tape on a nearby tree, and the area was known locally as a hunting spot. Police concluded that the shot was likely accidental, part of target practice, rather than deliberate. Peter had a substantial life insurance policy totaling $60,000, roughly equivalent to $300,000 in 2024. Soon after, Dr. Engelman and Ruth divorced, and he married Carmen, whom he had known since childhood. His son from his marriage to Ruth remained with Edna. Despite his marriage to Carmen, Dr. Engelman continued extramarital affairs, including liaisons with Ruth, Carmen, and even Sandy Fry, the widow of his business associate Eric Fry, who had died in a dynamite accident at their trike strip business. Dr. Engelman's pattern of exploitation continued with another patient, Barbara Boyle. On November 3, 1977, someone posing as a farm girl gained access to the home of Arthur and Vernita Goosewell in Everettville, Illinois. The elderly couple was attacked and shot in the head, leaving behind an inheritance of $340,000 to their son, Ronald Goosewell. Ronald was married to Barbara Boyle. Less than 2 years later, on April 4, 1979, Ronald was found beaten and shot to death in his car outside a hotel in East St. Louis, Illinois, after being missing for 4 days. Following Ronald's murder, Barbara collected his inheritance along with multiple life insurance policies, a sum equivalent to nearly $1.7 million today. She then transferred the money to Dr. Glennon Engelman. Authorities began to notice a troubling pattern of deaths linked to Dr. Engelman, though the community continued to see him as a generous and committed dentist. In reality, his dental work was often sloppy. He frequently produced poor-quality casts for dentures and dental appliances, forcing the dental lab owned by Sophie Barrera to redo much of the work. As his business struggled, Dr. Engelman accrued debts with Barrera's lab, setting the stage for further manipulation and crimes. Sophie Barrera owned a dental laboratory in South St. Louis and had grown frustrated by 1980 with Dr. Engelman's failure to pay her. She had filed a lawsuit against him, which was scheduled to go to court just days after her murder. On January 14, 1980, Sophie entered her vehicle in South St. Louis, and shortly afterward, the vehicle exploded. Police discovered remnants of a bomb under her charred car. Before her death, Sophie had confided to her son that she feared for her life, believing Dr. Glenn Engelman to be dangerous. Engelman was questioned for 3 hours and then released, with authorities convinced of his involvement but needing proof. Initially, there was public speculation that the bombing might be connected to ongoing mob conflicts over control of St. Louis labor unions. However, evidence indicated this was not a mob hit. The primary suspect became Dr. Engelman, who owed Sophie $15,000. Detectives struggled to find a way to stop him. They began interviewing his ex-wife, Ruth, the mother of his son. At first, Ruth refused to provide information, but eventually, she disclosed that Engelman often boasted about killing people, claiming he possessed a superpower that allowed him to kill without remorse. He admitted to murdering Eric Fry, Peter Home, and the Goosewell family, framing it as a calculated act for profit. While Ruth agreed to cooperate with the police, her early testimony could not be used in court because Engelman's confessions to her occurred during their marriage, protected under spousal privilege. To gather actionable evidence, Ruth agreed to wear a wire. She met with Engelman under the pretense of exchanging their son or socializing. Despite their continued sexual relationship, despite Engelman being married to Carmen, Ruth attempted to elicit a confession. Initially, Engelman did not take the bait, and Ruth feared for her own safety. Ruth then proposed planting a bug in her bedroom to record Engelman while he visited for sexual encounters, but he remained suspicious and said nothing incriminating. Later, she met him at a diner while wearing a wire. During this meeting, Engelman spoke candidly about being homicidally intimate with the widow of one of his victims, detailing multiple murders and admitting that he found killing more sexually satisfying than sex. Ruth was subsequently placed in the Witness Protection Program. Carmen, no longer married to Engelman, and her brother Nick were also brought in for questioning to corroborate Ruth's allegations, helping to build the case against the serial-killing dentist. As potential co-conspirators, they requested immunity in exchange for their testimony against Dr. Engelman. Carmen recounted a disturbing account. She had been working for the dentist when he advised her to find someone with substantial benefits to marry. He instructed her about Eric Fry, claiming he had orchestrated Sandy Fry's marriage to Eric with the intent of murdering him for the insurance proceeds. After Carmen married, she said Dr. Engelman directed her to ensure her husband was killed, staging it to appear as an accidental shooting. Glennon Engelman was finally arrested and charged with murder in 1980. Carmen testified at his first trial, which resulted in Engelman's conviction for the murder of Peter Home, earning him a 50-year prison sentence. He later pled guilty to the murder of Sophie Barrera to avoid the death penalty. Serving that life sentence in Missouri, Engelman returned to court in Illinois by 1985. In 1984, Robert Handy, an acquaintance of Engelman, admitted to participating in the Goosewell family murder conspiracy. He implicated Engelman in bludgeoning Arthur and Vernita Goosewell, as well as Ronald's widow, Barbara Boyle. Engelman received 3 life sentences for the Goosewell murders and an additional 30-year federal sentence for mail fraud. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, including conspiring with his first wife to murder her husband, James Bullock, in 1958. Edna Ruth was never charged due to insufficient evidence. Barbara Boyle went on trial in 1985 for the murders of her in-laws and husband. She was acquitted of Arthur and Vernita's murders, but convicted of conspiracy to commit the murder of Ronald Goosewell and sentenced to 50 years. She was granted parole in 2009. During his incarceration, Engelman often compared himself to the outlaw Jesse James. Unlike typical serial killers, his actions were at least partly motivated by greed, and he appeared to revel in his lack of remorse. Dr. Glennon Engelman died of diabetes-related complications in 1999 at the age of 72 while incarcerated at Jefferson City. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.